In the ancestral house deep in the Canadian countryside, there is a door that has been locked for half a century, and each night, someone inside still whispers her name. The rain came in from the east that morning, sweeping over the Laurentian hills like a slow tide of silver and ash. From the cracked windows of the old train, Claire Morrison watched it blur the horizon into smudges of gray, the way ink bleeds on paper. Her suitcase sat by her feet, its weight disproportionate to the few clothes she'd packed, as if it carried the heaviness of the decision she'd made, the life she'd left behind. She was going home, or rather to the place that had been home once, long before she learned that home could be another word for exile. The letter had arrived a month ago, a brief, almost cold notice that her father had died, and she was now the sole heir to the Morrison ancestral estate in northern Quebec. It wasn't unexpected. Her father had been sick for years, his voice on the phone always a thin thread between breaths. What had been unexpected was her grandmother's scrawled postscript at the bottom of the page. "You will take care of the house. It's your duty now." Claire had laughed when she read it. Duty. The word belonged to another century. But here she was, 3 trains and 1 rented taxi later, watching the landscape turn into the kind of countryside that belonged in oil paintings and old ghosts. The house rose from the mist like something that had been waiting for her. It was enormous, a sprawl of dark cedar and weather-beaten stone, its steep gables knifing into the gray sky. The windows were tall and narrow, their panes dim with age, reflecting nothing but the storm. Ivy clung to the walls like green veins, and the wrought iron gate creaked open as if reluctantly allowing her in. Her grandmother was waiting at the door. Mrs. Evelyn Morrison was a small woman, but her presence filled the doorway like a shadow. She wore black, as she always had, her hair pinned into a severe bun, her hands pale and cold when she took Claire's in greeting. Her eyes, dark and sharp, traveled over her granddaughter's face as though searching for something, or perhaps ensuring something was missing. "You came," she said simply. "I said I would." Mrs. Morrison stepped aside, letting her in without further ceremony. The air inside was cooler than outside, smelling faintly of dust and cedar oil, as if the house had been holding its breath for years. They dined in silence that night, in the vast dining hall lit by a single chandelier whose light barely reached the far corners. Claire tried not to stare at the portraits lining the walls, stern-faced ancestors who seemed to watch every movement she made. Halfway through the meal, she decided to break the quiet. "I saw a door upstairs," she said. "Near the east wing. It was locked." Her grandmother's fork paused in mid-air. "That part of the house is sealed," she said. "Why?" "Because some doors are meant to stay closed." There was no invitation for further questions in her voice, so Claire said nothing more. But the image of that door, narrow, painted the color of old bone, lodged itself in her mind. The rain did not stop that night. It drummed against the roof, whispered against the glass, and in the spaces between, Claire thought she heard something else. A softer sound, weeping. At first she thought it was the wind slipping through cracks in the shutters. But it was too deliberate, too human. It came from above her room, somewhere in the attic. She lay awake for hours, listening. It faded just before dawn, leaving her with the unsettling feeling that the house had been speaking to her, and she had chosen not to answer. The following days were filled with the kind of duties her grandmother considered important. Inspecting the crumbling west garden, signing estate documents, nodding politely at old townsfolk who called her Miss Morrison, as though she had been gone for only a week instead of a decade. But at night, the weeping returned. Sometimes it was a low, mournful sound. Other times it rose sharply, like someone calling out in pain before forcing themselves into silence. On the 5th night, Claire could no longer ignore it. She lit a candle and followed the sound through the darkened halls. The house at night seemed larger, as if the shadows added square footage. She passed beneath portraits whose eyes gleamed faintly in the flickering light, past closed doors that seemed to lean closer as she walked. The sound led her to the locked attic door. It was the same as before, narrow, bone-colored, but now she noticed something she hadn't before. Her name, scratched faintly into the wood near the bottom, as if by a desperate hand. She touched the letters. The wood was cold. Behind it, the weeping stopped. The next morning, she asked her grandmother about the attic. "There's nothing in there," Mrs. Morrison said, her voice clipped. "Then why is it locked?" Her grandmother's eyes hardened. "We